This is the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. This is the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I am, of course, Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and the Better Sports Network's The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Remember, RV Radio 2022 is what you want to use to get a listeners only 10% discount to RotoViz. Your subscription will give you all the RotoViz content, all the RotoViz tools that so many of these high stakes players love to use, and it supports the podcast channel as well. Don't forget the FFPC Weekly Challenge Week 5 is live. No draft, no salary cap, just choose 10 players. If you're playing in the slim format, just choose 12 players. If you're playing in the classic format with kickers and defenses, and only one player per NFL team, once you have your lineup submitted via a $35 entry fee or a $200 entry fee, you have the opportunity to win up to $2,500. And obviously, if you want to play for a 2023 FFPC Main Event entry, you can do that at myffpc.com for $200. Winner take all, 10 teams. You got a 10% chance at worst of winning a free entry to play for $1 million next year. Now, this week on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, I am pleased to welcome in a 44, yes, I counted them up, 44-time FFPC and Footballguys League winner. You follow him on Twitter at Austin R. Martin 84. Let's welcome in Austin Martin, ladies and gentlemen. Austin, happy game day. Thanks for doing the show tonight. And welcome to week 5. We're live, we're running, and you're off and running with all the thousands of teams you're playing this year as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Balky. I'm overdue, so appreciate you having me on.
So is Seth Kaler, and I'm pronouncing that name right, Seth Kaler, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you guys the only ones that run your teams, or do you have other people helping you out with lineups and waivers and everything like that?
Oh, no, it's just us. Seth and I manage a pretty large group of teams. We have a couple of one-off teams. My cousin Andy and I share a couple teams as well, and Seth and Andy have a couple teams, so we have some commonality there. But yeah, no, I hear about people hiring out and having interns to do their waivers.
Right.
No, we handle it all. No easy way to do hard work.
Right, that's a good point. So Wednesday nights, I would imagine, is pretty tough, and Sunday morning's pretty tough on you and Seth, right?
Yeah, it's pretty busy. Sometimes we have a little bit of time to spare, but that's why I couldn't commit to Tuesday night, because it's there's only so many hours, and
right.
With all these teams just trying to grind through, gets to be a little bit stressful. So just a lot to process in a short period of time, and trying to get through all the teams, and you're going to make some mistakes, but trying to just minimize those and do a little bit better than the rest of people is the goal. So
how did you guys handle the Alvin Kamara scratch on Sunday? Because early Sunday morning, we found out from London that he was going to be out. Were you guys already up, ready, and got him out of all your lineups?
Yeah. There was always a little bit of risk there. I know there was a lot of discourse floating around Twitter about people wanting to change the rules and get him out of their lineup after lock and all that. I don't get all that. That's kind of funny to me. Yeah, no, we were ready for it. I mean, it was a surprise, but these guys, they get in either a limited or no practice late in the week. I mean, you have to be ready for that. So
right.
It's always a possibility.
All right, so let's get into it. And the first question I'm going to ask you it first because it affects tonight's lineup. for a lot of people out there. We obviously know Jonathan Taylor's out. We know Nyheim Hines is going to receive an increased number of touches tonight. We also know that Philip Lindsay got promoted from the Colts practice squad earlier today. How do you feel about this Colts backfield tonight? Is it Nyheim Hines in certain spots and that's it? Or would you look at, some of the other, I always forget, I was on the Better Sports Network for the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show last night. Is it Deion Harris, Deion Jackson, Deion Jones, the other guy that's been on the roster this whole time? Is he going to factor into this at all?
I think it's Deion Jackson.
There you go, Deion Jackson. I'm going to go with you on that.
There were some sharp people that were pushing Lindsay. I just kind of avoided that situation altogether. I get it. Someone has to get those touches. JT, I think, is going to be back probably next week, if not the following. You have to make some decisions. You can't add everyone. And, if JT was struggling to get it going, how am I supposed to trust Philip Lindsay? So
that's a great point.
On a short week, new to the team, I think you got to fire up Hines where you got him. But other than that, it was kind of an avoid for me. But it wouldn't be shocking to see one of these guys punch one in.
Speaking of punching it in, excuse me, Clyde Edwards-Helaire did just that via Tom Brady's arm on Sunday Night Football. However, that was not the only fireworks. Those were not the only fireworks we saw on Sunday night from the Chiefs backfield. Isaiah Pacheco definitely had his best game of the season, 60-plus yards, carrying the rock that night. Is he about to turn this Chiefs backfield into a timeshare? And I want to preface this by saying we had people, and maybe you were one of them, that were saying this, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a lot of people were saying was kind of smoke and mirrors even prior to week 4, right? Because of what he's been able to do or not do on the ground. Pacheco looked pretty good there. Is this backfield turning into a timeshare before our eyes? And if so, how do you handle that if you have Pacheco or if you have Edwards-Helaire or if you have both?
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like they're kind of both getting it done with smoke and mirrors here.
Right.
You look at the snap share. I mean, Pacheco hasn't gotten over 20, maybe 23, 25% in any of the games. And the 2 games he got run were both blowouts. So, you get a cheap touchdown here and there. You just can't. How are you going to put a guy in your lineup that's getting 20% of snaps? It's probably going to make it harder for CEH to continue to get it done. But, with the way that offense is humming, there's going to be some production. So I'd be more worried about, that number continuing to grow for Pacheco as the season goes along. At some point it could become difficult to roll Edwards-Helaire out in your lineup with confidence. But, going through these lineups, the places where I have him, I mean, he's a slam dunk auto start for sure. We'll see how that goes as the season rolls along. Right now, he's looking like a screaming value, but not sure how long that holds.
Brian Robinson is still on the NFI list for Washington. As a result, the Commanders don't have to list an official practice status for him. What we've heard from the beat writers for the Commanders was that Brian Robinson once again practiced today. And some of the beat writers saying he showed a little burst. Now, here's the question. Antonio Gibson was already being faded out in the preseason before Robinson had this unfortunate accident or whatever you want to call it, where he got shot by carjackers. I guess that's not an accident. But you have a situation where even without Robinson, Gibson's snap counts have gone down the last several weeks. My question to you is, if Robinson is active this week, number one, is he a guy that you'd be looking to play right out of the gate? And number two, what does this mean for Gibson going forward? Is he just basically a handcuff at this point? Is he going to be part of this timeshare with not only Robinson, but J.D. McKissick as well?
This one's tough for me. It's a pretty sad state of affairs. They love Robinson. I mean, and how can you not? Coming back after that so quickly, it's like they saw Gibson in week 1. They fed him targets. He was the 3-down back that we all knew he could be, and said, whoa, enough of that. We don't want you getting carried away and hanging on to this job. So, yeah, I mean, I'm concerned. I've got a fair amount of Gibson in Dynasty. I faded Robinson, so it's not looking great. I mean, I'm shocked that he's coming back this quickly.
Yeah,
I mean, pretty unprecedented, but yeah, I think it's going to get ugly. I don't know if it's a pure handcuff situation. I think it'll be a split. There were enough signs in the preseason that it was like the transition was about to happen right as this all went down. And, he gets shot, and we're in the middle of drafts and trying to adjust and figure out what that means for Gibson. Where should he be valued and all of that. Looked like he might be a screaming value, and now all the air is getting sucked out of that. So, yeah, it's going to be really tough to use him. You probably are looking at, I don't even know if it's a high-end handcuff, really. If you're basing it on week one, how they could use him, sure, but they don't want to use him that way. And he didn't make, any massive, blunders like you saw in the preseason where he put the ball on the ground or missed any big blocks or anything like that. The things that pro running backs are supposed to do that Gibson hadn't shown up to this point. The reasons why they like Robinson so much. And so it's a little disheartening to see him fall out of favor without, really, he didn't play his way out of a job here. But either did Robinson. So
Antonio Gibson's not loving it, Austin, in the YouTube chat right now. No, it's just one of those things. You can't please everybody all the time. I want to shift things over to the Chicago Bears running back situation, because for the first time, we have seen David Montgomery get a limited practice in today. Now, you remember back to week 3, that's when Montgomery went down with the ankle injury. I think he had a knee injury that game as well. Knowing what we know now, knowing that Khalil Herbert looked pretty good in Montgomery's stead, knowing that Montgomery could come back, the FFPC has another waiver wire run coming up on Sunday morning. Is Tristan Ebner? I know you guys got a lot of shares of him right now. Is Ebner still going to remain on those teams, or is he a guy that you cut loose and look for somebody else at this point?
It really just depends on the team. I cut him loose on a couple of teams on Wednesday last night. Mm-hmm. It's all kind of blurring together at this point. Yeah. No, you got to make some of those tough decisions, and you can't be rostering teams' third running back with a lot of frequency. So yeah, we cut him loose on a few teams. Probably be forced to let him go on the rest. Wasn't quite as involved as you'd expect. I guess it was a sloppy game. And they don't seem to want to give, those targets to Herbert, which is super frustrating, because I think he's capable of being a 3-down back. But in that offense, it's really hard to get excited about anything. That monster performance of Herbert's in week 3, you expected a lot more in week 4, but again, a sloppy game. We'll see about this week. I'm not expecting to see Montgomery out there this week, but hopefully we can get one more week of Herbert.
One of the things that a lot of FFPC players are talking about, and fantasy football players in general, is the shift in quarterback from Mitchell Trubisky to Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh. The albeit limited conversations I've had with high stakes owners have been saying this is a good thing for Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Chase Claypool, Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris, everybody. This is a good thing because Mitchell Trubisky just did not look like a capable quarterback anymore. Specifically looking at George Pickens here, Austin, what does it mean for him knowing that his target share went up a little bit last week with both Trubisky and Pickett, calling the plays or signaling or running the offense, God. And then Kenny Pickett, now a full game this coming week as a massive underdog to the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. What does this mean for Pickens, not only in week 5, but going forward?
Well, it's kind of interesting that, they make the QB change and now all of a sudden the route tree opens wide open for Pickens. He's running all kinds of routes, whereas the first few weeks he's running nothing but fly routes. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And yeah, is it a coincidence that the young guys, Freiermuth and Pickens, are getting all the targets now with the new QB? I don't know, but I mean, I've been not shy about my infatuation with Pickens, so I think he's a real player.
And this is a good thing, Austin, right?
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, as you just alluded to, they're not only letting Pickett run, go wild, they're unlocking George Pickens as well.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a huge positive. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if by midseason or late season, George Pickens is the Steelers' wide receiver 1. I really don't think that's, a crazy prediction by any means. I mean, the kid has the talent. He doesn't get open quite like Deontay does. Deontay's a much better route runner at this stage of his career and just a target hog. But, when Pickens says he's open all the time, you see these highlight catches. I mean, the kid is just a freak show. But what does being open in the NFL mean? I mean, you put the ball out there, he's going to go get it, is what he's telling you.
Keep this in mind, too. Deontay Johnson did sign an extension this past offseason, but it was only a 2-year extension. Yep. Normally you don't see that from teams that view a receiver as their potential number 1 going forward. And there is an out for him after the 2023 season. So maybe they let him go 2022. Maybe they let him go 2023, and it's like 1A and 1B with Pickens and Johnson. And then it's, George Pickens' season, as the kids say, coming up in 2024. But that's not to say that Pickens can't excel not only the rest of this season, but next year as well. A guy who, God, I've been bit by, that I'm still waiting for him to turn it on. I was hoping that it was DJ Moore season last year and this year, and it's not happening. At what point this season, or quite frankly, if at all, does DJ Moore get back to at least close to automatic start every week status here, Austin?
It's really tough, man. I don't know if it's happening this year. Some of these rosters, you just don't have a choice as the season moves along here, and especially when bye weeks hit. I mean, DJ Moore is going to be in your lineup when these bye weeks hit. You're just going to have to suck it up and deal with it. I mean, he's playing 100% of the snaps. Mm-hmm. You're not finding players on the waiver wire that aren't coming off the field, and eventually that's going to translate. I mean, you saw Laviska Shenault make a 70-yard house call. There's no reason why that can't be DJ Moore. And if it is, it's a whole different conversation that we're having. So it's a sad state that we had to get excited about, 5 catches for 60 yards or whatever it was last week. But that's kind of where we're at. We were calling OBJ washed last year until he went to the Rams, and here we are again. So
right.
We told ourselves a story that Baker was an upgrade for DJ Moore. It's pretty crazy in hindsight.
Yeah, and I think if I'm hearing you correctly, this is not a DJ Moore problem. This is a Carolina Panthers quarterback problem.
Yeah.
Which is tough. It's just one of those things. And probably his value in drafts was depressed based on that. Whether it would be Mayfield, whether it would have been Darnold, we didn't know at that time. We thought it was going to be Mayfield. But at this point in the season, if you invested DJ Moore, like you said, you kind of got to keep rolling him out there, right? Have you and Seth benched him aggressively in any leagues for some waiver wire pickups or some guys that you drafted much later?
Yeah, we've set him down in several leagues last week. I mean, it's team by team, depending on how we drafted it. We were fortunate in some of the bigger money leagues to we prioritized Olave towards the end, and you get him in the 8th, 9th round, and that really plugs a hole for you there. So we've had the benefit of not having to force him into every lineup. There are definitely spots where we got to use him. It's crazy to think that we've been getting wide receiver 2 production from DJ Moore year over year. How could it get worse? So,
yeah.
But the thing for Dynasty, things change so fast in the NFL. And even as recent as last week, and I don't know if there was any truth to it, but there were discussions about trade rumors, DJ Moore to Kansas City. Can you imagine? I mean, forget about it. You put a guy like that on Kansas City, and we're talking about a top 5 receiver.
Absolutely, we are. Yeah.
So, if you can buy low on DJ Moore, if someone's really, really desperate to get out from under him, and you can get him for a second round pick or comparable, I would scoop that up.
You mentioned how fast things change in Dynasty, and I know you and Seth play a ton of FFPC Dynasty leagues. Do you guys have the time to make these snap trade offers, trying to buy low on a guy or maybe sell high on a guy? How active are you guys going to be during the season when you're trying to improve your Dynasty rosters, but at the same time realizing there's only a finite 24 hours in a day?
Yeah, funny you'd ask that. I was talking with Dave Hubbard about that earlier today, where, once the season starts for me, it's Dynasty, but I get into redraft mode. It's the week starts and it's processing what happened, prioritizing waivers, making the bids, adjusting the bids as the weeks go along. And you get to a point where making trades is difficult. It's kind of, you make the deals that you have to. And I've made a couple deals this week. What it is it's teams where, no matter what, you're going to have some variance, and you're going to have some teams that don't perform the way you expected, and trying to get out in front of it quickly to start positioning yourself for next year, even if you're not quite waving the white flag, making some of those deals that are going to set you up for the future. Well, values are still high. That's kind of the priority. So, but this next, 6 weeks or so, probably not a lot of trade activity. But of course, as the trade deadline rolls around and redraft rosters are starting to kind of find their groove and running out of fab in a bunch of leagues, I'll start to find a little bit more time to work on some deals.
Yeah, certainly opportunities present themselves later on in the season for sure. I want to talk about a guy who has been disappointing for, I think, fantasy owners, but not near to the level of DJ Moore, and that's Rashad Bateman. Through 4 games, he's had 22 targets. He's caught 11 of those, 243 yards. He's gotten into the end zone twice. And it's weird because Lamar Jackson's been awesome. I mean, you'd make the case that he was the best player in fantasy football, not only in week 2, but in week 3 as well. And I think if we look at that, in a vacuum, we're like, oh, Bateman must have crushed it. Well, not exactly. So have we seen what we're going to see of Rashad Bateman? Is it just going to be these, kind of like big play hit games, and then, where he's kind of MIA type games where, week 1, week 4, 3 catches, 17 yards. The week before that, 2 catches, 59 yards. Now, you didn't get in the end zone in week 1 and week 2. Is it hit or miss for, with Bateman this year? Or is Lamar Jackson going to find a way to not only keep this Ravens offense absolutely electric and on fire, but involve Bateman as well in these big plays consistently going forward?
That's super frustrating because he looks just incredible. I mean, they said that on that long touchdown run. I think that was the fastest clock time for a receiver since Hollywood Brown sometime last year. I mean, he looks absolutely phenomenal. And I watched Bateman a ton being from Minnesota here. So, I had a pretty good idea of what he was. But being honest, I didn't necessarily think he was going to be, an alpha wide receiver 1 in the NFL. He looks like that to me. It's just about getting the snaps. So, you can't be a wide receiver 1 playing 55, 60% of snaps. It's just not going to work. If you want to get to that elite level, you got to be upwards of, mid 70s, 80% or more of snaps. You got to be on the field to score points. So I don't know, last week you point to the injury. Prior to that, why aren't they ramping him up? If we can get him up above 70% of snaps, I'll be feeling real good about it. But if not, he might find the bench in certain weeks on, depending on the team.
I want to get back to tonight's game, Colts and Broncos, the horse race, Thursday night football game. One of the bright spots in Indianapolis this year, Michael Pittman's been hurt and he's been okay. I mean, last week I think was kind of a down week for him. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor in that offensive line, massive surprise and disappointment there for a lot of people. But one of the bright spots, I think, has been Matt Ryan, the way he's targeted his tight ends. Saw the big Jelani Woods game in week 3, I think that was. And obviously Mo Alley Cox, we saw him crush it in week 4. I actually have him going in a league tonight. And I'm just curious to your thoughts in a tight end premium league like the FFPC, the Footballguys Players Championship. Is Mo Alley Cox a sneaky flex play tonight, given how many targets that the Colts tight end position has been getting, and knowing that it's not going to be easy to throw to Pittman or run the ball with Nyheim Hines tonight?
Yeah, any chance we could change this to team tight end?
Yeah, I don't listen. That's above my pay grade. But as a Mo Alley Cox owner, especially in the KFFSC, I'd be all for it at this point. Because if I could get, because it's Woods, it's Cox, and there was another guy, Kylan Granson, as well, has been making some plays as well this year.
Yeah, I've been chasing that one since drafts, really. As things kind of winded down, I zeroed in a little bit on Mo Alley as tight end 2, tight end 3 on a lot of these teams where I push tight end back, which is way more frequent than I wish. And that's been kind of a cheat code for me over the last several years, pushing back QB, pushing back tight end, and finding those guys that end up being weekly starters that you lock in, the Darren Wallers, the Dalton Schultzes, the Dawson Knoxes that you get for super cheap late. Those guys, other than Conklin early, those type of guys haven't really emerged so far this year.
Not this season,
so
yeah, you're right.
It's been a huge edge to have, a top 6 quarterback or really a top 2 tight end. You've got the Hawkinsons and the Goddards, but beyond that, it gets pretty dicey. So, to your question, we scooped up a ton of Mo Alley this week, got him on a bunch of leagues. I had cut him everywhere after week 1. Cut him everywhere, got him back a bunch. I'm rolling him out where I need to, but I have, kind of a rule we talk about, never play a part-time tight end or running back over a full-time receiver. So, I'm really trying to avoid that. You make these rules, you try and stick to them as much as possible. But if I can play a full-time receiver over a tight end that's getting 60% of snaps, I'm going to do that. But I will have plenty of Mo Alley going tonight.
I don't know if I'm fortunate or not. We'll find out after the game tonight if I have enough Alley Cox going or if I don't. But I'm definitely rooting for him tonight to get into the end zone, to make a few plays. We'll see what happens. This Colts-Broncos game is going to be really interesting on so many levels when you consider that you're not going to have Javonte Williams. You're not going to have Jonathan Taylor, right? Russell Wilson's banged up a little bit. The Colts offense has just been so bizarre this season. And if I had to say, if there's one offense that has surprised me more than the Colts offense this season, probably been the Broncos, because I expected bigger things from both these teams tonight. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Getting back to the tight end conversation, Evan Engram, first 2 weeks, and I know there's plenty of people that were, the Evan Engram truthers were out there in full force saying this guy's going to make hay while the sun shines with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville this year. And then in the first 2 weeks, 12 targets for him. It's looking great. But in the last 2 weeks, he's only seen 4 total targets. As a guy who you and Seth have Evan Engram in a lot of spots this year, will the real Evan Engram please stand up, right? Is it the guy who we saw in the first 2 weeks? Is it the guy that we saw in the last 2 weeks? Or more than likely, Austin, is it a guy that's going to be somewhere in the middle of those?
Yeah, it's that last part, somewhere in the middle. I don't take too much away from this last week. I mean, it was a really sloppy game with the weather, so I try not to put a whole lot of stock into that. I'd kind of lean into more so, what he did the first couple of weeks. He's just in the mix with a bunch of these guys, like, the Irv Smiths no longer the Albertos, but there's this tier of tight ends where, you can use them, but you're not going to feel great about it. The Everetts and the Njokus have elevated themselves well above. Unfortunately, those are kind of guys we pump the brakes on a little bit towards the end. Ingram's going to be tough to use, but I like what they're doing down there in Jacksonville. I mean, that's a competitive team on both sides of the ball. You like what Lawrence is doing. Peterson seems to be delivering on what he's supposed to be able to do, the QB whisperer. And I think things are trending up, other than Kirk. Who else do you really have to compete? They don't want to throw it to Etienne, apparently. So there should be some targets there to be had.
I want to shift this to something that in all my analysis, all my guesses of where the fantasy season would be leading us, never thought coming into week 5, Austin, we'd be talking about Geno Smith of all people. Consider this. Let me set the stage. Russell Wilson gets shipped out of Seattle to Denver. Russell Wilson for years has been complaining that, well, I don't know about outwardly complaining, but fantasy owners are like, why are we watching Seattle run the ball 30 plus times in the first 3 quarters? And then once Seattle's in a competitive game in the 4th quarter, then Russell Wilson gets to throw it all over the place to Disley and Metcalf and Lockett and everybody they've had there, right? He goes to Denver. Now Geno Smith in Seattle is on pace after 4 games to throw for well over 4,000 yards, well over 20 touchdowns, and he has a completion rate, and I'm not making this up, 77%. Smith has been crushing it. What does this mean for us? Well, the buys start next week, but even before that, are we seriously looking at Geno Smith as a guy, if we have Matthew Stafford, if we have Aaron Rodgers, are we seriously looking at Smith, especially this week, are we looking at Smith as like, God, I picked him up just kind of as a fail-safe. Do I have to start looking at starting him over these guys I drafted in the 10th, 11th, and 12th round this year?
Yeah, it's crazy. You absolutely do. We scooped him up. You probably saw we got a ton of Geno, and you've got these guys like Stafford. Stafford is the QB 33 in points per game. Yeah, QB 33.
And there's only 32 teams in the NFL.
Yeah. So you do the math there. I'm definitely interested. Got to be careful a little bit. It is a small sample, but they're running more plays. We'll see if the pass attempts continue. We want to see more than 30 attempts per game. Been a couple games that have kind of hovered right around that 30 attempts number. And that's not great, but he's got playmakers. I'm definitely interested. And we'd be burying Russ if it weren't for last week. The combination of what Geno is doing and what Russ showed the first couple of weeks. I mean, good Lord.
Well, and I can't remember who I was talking to. I brought this up. The most frustrating thing about Russell Wilson last week was, he stunk all game, but then he showed what we were expecting on a more consistent basis at the end of the game. We know he can do it. We know he's got the tools to do it. Why can he not do it over a 4-quarter game? That's the most frustrating thing and not saying that I have Russell Wilson in all these spots, but in the spots I do, I'm like, come on, man, just keep doing this. And I don't know. And maybe this is a larger question, Austin, who's to blame there? Is it Wilson that is on the downside of his career? Is it Nathaniel Hackett, who's overmatched as a head coach? Is it his offensive line or maybe the supporting cast around him that's just not playing up to snuff? How do you look at that Denver Broncos offense right now?
Yeah, so you look at a 4-week sample and you have one of those weeks where they went to Seattle. That was not a great spot. They know Russ inside and out. That we should have probably saw that coming a little bit in hindsight. When these quarterbacks that change teams go to play their old team, it's more often than not working out favorably for the old team. You saw that with Brady last year. Wentz got just beat down earlier this year. So that's no surprise. Hackett is in way over his head. It seems quite obvious that he was brought in to try and lure Rodgers to Denver. And that was kind of the main attraction there. But he brought in a special advisor. So you have to at least, give
you commend him for that. Yeah. Not a lot of other coaches would have done that.
No, yeah. I mean, these guys, the ego, they are egomaniacs. So yeah, they're not going to admit weakness very often. So that was encouraging to see. Hopefully we see more of what we saw last week, and not the first three.
Yeah, and that's the idea, right? Because if it happens with Russell Wilson, it's probably going to happen for Cortland Sutton, especially Jerry Jeudy, who's really been letting a lot of people down. And I don't, I'm not saying the season's over for Albert Okwuegbunam, but my God, after week one, it's been really rough. And now Dulcich is coming back too from injury, so now we got to worry about that too. I want to ask you one final question before I do. Let me ask you this about the Denver running back situation. How did you handle it in waivers last night with not only Melvin Gordon, being taken to most of these leagues, but Latavius Murray available in a lot and Mike Boone probably available in a lot as well? How did you and Seth handle that?
We went, our bids for Boone were between 4 and 13%. We landed him in 2 mains. Latavius, we went 4 to 6% on Latavius. We got him on 2 teams. So we didn't get these guys very much. A lot of spots didn't have the money, but I mean, these guys went for crazy money. Yeah. And Latavius went for more than Boone in a ton of spots. So really interesting to see how people are processing this. I mean, where you have an established RB1, I've never seen 2 running backs go for 40% plus.
Right.
In the same waiver run. I mean, it's true insanity, but I think it speaks to how ugly and unfruitful the waiver wire has been this year. I mean, there have not been difference makers. And so, we don't have the luxury of plucking starting running backs off the waiver wire. We got to go down to the second and third. I mean, the second guy is always rostered. So we're going down the line to the third option. And, you got to be proactive. And, we weren't going to pay up for these guys like some people did. I get it. You gotta do something, and you want to put potential difference makers, guys that even have a chance to emerge as the season goes along on your team.
Yeah.
And it's been really tough going this year as far as that goes.
How do your blind budgets look right now heading into week 5? By and large, do you have a lot of money left on a lot of teams, or have you guys spent a good chunk already?
Probably like we got like 30 to 50% in most teams. So, there was no Eli Mitchell this year, right? No. So, there have been a few guys that we've paid for, but overall we're in pretty decent shape where, we aren't too hamstrung. This week it was a lot of QB and tight end for me. The Genos, the Mo Alley Cox, the Will Dissly. I mean, tight end has just been a total wasteland. QB too. So, kind of calling in some reinforcements there. And, the other thing I've been noticing this year, even with COVID not being an issue, I think there are more teams rostering 2 quarterbacks or more.
Yeah.
In the 5Ks, we got multiple teams rostering 4 quarterbacks. I mean,
in the same league?
Yes.
Oh my God, it's wild stuff. I have not realized that.
I mean, $5,000 entry, and you have multiple teams holding 4 quarterbacks. So when a Geno's out there, I looked at it and said, well, we better go get this guy, or we might, we're going to be scraping the absolute bottom of the barrel when we need a bye week fill in, or we've got a lot of Lamar and Jalen Hurts and these guys that are a little more risky. Kyler. One of these guys goes down, and if you don't have a decent option, I mean, it used to be you could always find a quarterback. It's pretty dicey when guys start collecting, 3-4 quarterbacks, and you have multiple guys doing it. So
I totally am with you on this. One of the things that I've learned this year, and I'm not going to make the same mistake again, and I've gotten away with it for multiple years, I'm not getting away with it this year, is in these, like the FFPC, 12 teams, 20-man rosters. I will oftentimes, even if I wait on a quarterback and I get, who's a good example? Like, Jalen Hurts obviously has been awesome, but, I think about these other guys like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Stafford, these type of guys. I'm good. I will not take a second quarterback at that point. Now, that has bitten me this year because of, the Dak Prescott thing really hit me hardest because that guy goes out in week 1, and now I'm scrambling, right? Thank God I phoned Jared Goff on several teams, and he's been all right. But other leagues I didn't get him in, and I'm rolling out Marcus Mariota. I'm rolling out Matt Ryan in some leagues, and I've got out of business with him. But that's the thing, like, and I don't know if the shift just happened this year or it's been the last couple of years, but I cannot do that anymore. I always like the extra spot for a one injury away type running back or a flyer receiver, or whatever. I think going forward, Austin, and I don't know if you feel this the same way for 2023 drafts, but I'm going to be looking at no matter what, even if I draft the top 14 quarterback, like I wait till, there's 12 of them off the board and then I'm taking somebody. At that point, I still got to get another guy because quarterbacks this year off the waiver wire, we mentioned Geno Smith. It's been rough. I can't even find Carson Wentz out there. I can't get Zach Wilson out there. It's been wild. Yeah,
it used to be, we used to point and laugh at these guys taking 2 quarterbacks and okay, you spot the fish, right? Like, listen, like it's ugly out there.
And they still could be the fish, right?
They could
if
be.
They're rostering 3 or 4 of them. But it's killing us. It's killing guys.
It is. And so when you play so many teams, that's the other thing is I'm definitely more open to that with playing a high volume teams because again, there's only so many hours and you don't want to spread yourself too thin and get jammed up without an option. So I'm definitely open to it more so than in the past. I think that's part of the game that's definitely evolved.
Part of the game this week on this show, as we always ask, we're heading into the dawn of week 5 tonight. We're only, less than an hour away from kickoff. But as you look at week 5 as a whole, Austin, is there a sleeper out there that you think not a lot of FFPC players will be starting this week that you think is in for a big week 5? And conversely, a guy that a lot of people will be rolling out there in their lineups that you look at it like, that's a mistake. You got to find a way to bench that guy.
Yeah, let me see. I made a couple notes here. Not a huge sleeper. I don't know if I'd call it a sleeper, but I think whether it's 1 QB or super flex leagues, I think Teddy is very much in play. I think you can start him with confidence. You love what you see in Miami. Teddy's an accurate thrower. He's got these 2 playmakers that are going to stretch the field. If he can hit him on some of these crossers and slants and some of these, I think he could put up a big game. You love what Mike McDaniels is doing down there. So I think he's a good option. And, I don't know if this would be really a sleeper, but he's been a disappointment up to this point. That'd be Terry McLaurin. I think with the Dotson injury, some targets are going to open up there. I think Terry and Curtis Samuel soak those up. So I think those guys are real nice starts this week. And if I can go in the bag for maybe a little reverse jinx here.
Let's hear it. Let's speak it into existence, man.
We're benching Jerry Jeudy in a number of spots. Now I'm still going to have him going on several teams, but I think you can sit him down in a few spots. Typical Thursday nonsense. We're probably in for a lower scoring game where the Broncos are going to be playing from ahead. Sutton has been Russ's guy. I'd love to see Jeudy break another long touchdown, but you peel back that long touchdown from week 1, and it's pretty ugly for Jerry Jeudy. So glad to at least see that he's healthy and able to play. And I'd love to see some production, but I think there's other guys that you could use this week. And I named a couple that I am using. I would use McLaurin over Jeudy. I was just going through my own teams to see, if I'm saying fade this guy, who am I actually starting him over or sitting him down for?
How much is Olave a must start? Because it looks like Michael Thomas is going to miss.
Yeah, I think you got to lock him in. There was some concern last week about can Dalton get him the ball. Dalton was pushing the ball downfield.
Yeah.
And Olave missed a couple opportunities where I think he had one long, it was like a 40-yard reception where his toe was just out. I mean, he could have had an even much bigger game than he did, and he still put up digits. So, yeah, I mean, I think Olave is pretty much locked in. I don't have a team, I think, where we can sit him. So it'd be, guys like Olave. I'm using running backs like Dobbins or Stevenson on one team over Judy, with the volume looking pretty good there, and a couple solid matchups. So
what about, just curiously, I don't know what your share is on Raheem Mostert, but he goes to New York this week to take on the Jets, and Miami's been using him quite a bit. Is there any value in using him in a full PPR league?
I think we have him on one team. We owe him, right? We should be paying a little more respect to.
My personal opinion is if you have Mostert, you utilize him until you physically can't, when he can't go, and then that's when you just kind of divorce yourself of him. But right now he's been going good.
Yeah, we were pretty into Chase Edmonds, and he is getting it done with smoke and mirrors as well. These multiple touchdown efforts, and he's dropped a couple too. But yeah, I mean, I think Mostert's viable. They should be probably trying to run it a little bit more, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's almost a full 1-for-1, swap. Going from Tua to Teddy, I don't think you lose much with that offense. That's just my opinion. He might not push it down the field quite as much, but Teddy's accurate. I think he can function well in that offense.
The other thing to remember too, for any of us who own Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle stats, it's like, a lot of that stuff that they do, they get open deep, but man, they are so good in open field that even if Bridgewater hits him in stride or hits him in
catch
field,
and run, slant to the house. I mean,
his stats are going to look the same. Bridgewater's will, and maybe he's not doing as much as Tonga Bailoa, but those receivers should be, at least we think. We hope. We hope that this has been a boon to your Week 5 fantasy lineups and your Week 5 second waiver run, as we have a 44-time champ in the FFPC and the Footballguys Players Championship, Austin Martin, joining us tonight. You follow him on Twitter at Austin R. Martin 84. Austin, congratulations on how you've managed all your teams, a lot of your teams up, into success, not only in the Footballguys and the main event, but obviously your big paybacks and everything at, high societies and everything like that in the FFPC as well. I know you're having some pretty good times with those teams early on. Thank you so much for doing the show tonight. Good luck not only this weekend, but in all your leagues going forward, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Always appreciate it, Bulky.
You got it. Austin Martin, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, I should have mentioned this, a former $500,000 winner in the FFPC World Famous Playoff Challenge less than 2 years ago. So he is doing very well. He's doing very well again this year. And you could be doing well as well in the FFPC. Remember, if you're not in it, you want to join, we have a weekly challenge going on. There's no draft or salary cap. You want to play the slim format where you don't have the kickers and defenses, you could do that. Formulate a lineup with 10 players, no kickers or defenses. You want to play kickers and defenses? We have the classic lineup where you can formulate a 12-player lineup as well. $35 to enter, or you can enter the $200 one, the 10-team one, where the winner takes all, and all is a 2023 FFPC Main Event entry to play for a $1 million championship next year as well. So make sure you're doing that. That's myffpc.com. You can sign up for those right now. That is going to do it for this episode of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Don't forget, we'll be back on this FFPC YouTube channel tomorrow. We're going to have the 5th place team owner in the Footballguys Players Championship heading into Week 5. Dan Fisher will join myself and Farrell Elliott. We'll be back here at 10/9 Central this coming Friday, which is tomorrow. Also, on the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown at 10/9 Central next week, we will have Barney Newkirk on, who is managing his team along with John Laskowski, his co-owner, into the FFPC Main Event upper echelon heading into Week 5. We'll talk about his team. I believe they are in the top 20 right now. So we'll talk with Barney next week about how they built that team, how they're managing that team, and what they expect going forward. That is Tuesday, 10/9 Central. And don't forget, the Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show will be going live, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook for the Better Sports Network channels, as well as the Better Sports Network app. Check that out. Get that app so you can not only call in and chat, but can register to win all these awesome prizes we are giving away for free, including autographed jerseys of players of yesteryear and today. That's all at the Better Sports Network, bettersports.com, and check out the apps both in the Google Play Store as well as the iOS Apple Store going forward as well. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We will talk with you again tomorrow night on this channel, 10/9 Central. Farrell Elliott, myself, and Dan Fisher. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thank you for listening to the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on iTunes under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email, rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think, and follow us on Twitter at RotoVizRadio. And remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount through the NFL podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast.